Okay, I'm Peter Walker. I'm the VCS rep on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and just reporting back as I usually do on the last Health and Wellbeing Board meeting. The last meeting was on the 29th of November, and the main item on that agenda was the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which had been hoped it would be signed off at that meeting for public consultation. In fact, it wasn't possible to do that, and there's been a delay while further work is put into the draft strategy to put it basically in a format where it can actually go out to consultation. There's, I think, a lot of the discussion on the health and wellbeing strategy at this point is both in terms of making sure it's a document that can be consulted on, and as well as one where the priorities are quite clear. And as I think I've mentioned before, there are sort of key themes that have come out in the various consultations, the various meetings that have taken place already. And some of those, I'll just run through them very quickly. First of all, the prevention one, which is certainly one that's been raised a lot in consultation with the VCS organisation, that should be a priority. That the issue of children, and Bristol has a growing population of children, and I think that has to be recognised in the health and wellbeing strategy, and particularly framed around ensuring that all children get the best start in life possible. Reducing inequalities, and the equalities issue I'll return to in a minute, but that's very much in the key principles for the strategy. Reducing unnecessary demand for services, looking at ways of doing things better to reduce that demand. Empowering people, very much in the core principles. Focusing on the individual, making sure that the services are tailored around the needs of the individual, not around the needs of the organisation delivering those services. Again, that's there. Improving the quality and safety of services, and ensuring really, and this is again something that the VCS sector argued for, was ensuring that there is a place for innovation in what we do. So it doesn't all get stuck in some sort of tram lines, that we always carry on doing exactly what we've done before, despite those services perhaps not being as good as they could be. So those sort of principles are going to be very much in the consultation document at the top of the agenda. And as I say, the aim now is to sign off the draft strategy for consultation at the board's next meeting on January the 17th, and between now and then there's a little subgroup we'll be working, which will be tidying things up in order that document is ready to go out. Once it goes out, there'll be a 12-week consultation period, and VOSCA, through its Voice and Influence, did hold a consultation meeting in November, and there'll be a further meeting organised by VOSCA in March to look at the document and to coordinate a consultation and feedback from the voluntary sector. So that's all happening. That document is running. So that was the key item on the agenda. Obviously, there was a lot of discussion around it. It's a lot of getting the wording right, making sure that the way it was pitched was consistent, but the messages by and large were pretty much, as I said, in terms of priorities. So that was a key item on the agenda. I mentioned about the equalities. The equalities issue came up, it was talked about at the VCS, the VOSCA event for VCS groups in November. The board at its meeting on the 29th did discuss this, and there's quite a recognition, as you would expect and hope, that equalities issues are taken very seriously by the board. There is this sort of like a sort of dilemma, I suppose, or at least a conflict between the idea that all groups should be represented, all equalities and interest groups should be represented on the board, and the need to have a board that is small enough to actually do the business, if you like, to get on as a working group. From the start, there's been a reluctance to go for a large board, and of, it could be sort of 40, 50 plus members, which would just be seen as pretty well unworkable. But despite that, I think the issue of equalities is seen as key And again, I suppose there's a hope now that, given the Equalities Act, there should be now more of an expectation that equalities issues should run through everything that happens, and that the board should be held to account when that doesn't happen. But anyway, the issue is going to be discussed at the board meeting on January the 17th on the agenda, and there'll be further discussion around that in the future, and yes, a key issue that is being addressed, and that will be taken forward in the new year. So moving on, there was discussion at the board meeting around specialised funding for extra care housing. This is an item that was brought up, seeking the board's support for a new development, making use of some Department of Health funds that have come available to develop an extra care scheme on the borders between South Gloucestershire and Bristol, which will provide a whole range of accommodation to provide support for older people in accommodation where their needs can be met without them having to move out of their accommodation there. It's also seen as a way, by providing this service, which are very popular, of a way of releasing accommodation, perhaps older people living in larger accommodation which they're perhaps unhappy in, and is inappropriate for their needs now, to actually go into something that's much more purpose built and is designed to provide support and care to them in their own homes in this development. So that's something that's progressing. It's likely to move ahead quite quickly, and the board was very much behind and supporting that development, that initiative. There's discussion about patient and public service user involvement, and the need for a joint approach between the different social care, health care, all the parties that make up the Health and Wellbeing Board, and a discussion about how that can be taken forward. And one of the proposals was that the Health and Wellbeing Board should develop a joint policy statement on patient, public and service user involvement, in order that all the organisations on the board comply with that joint statement. So again, the board begin to identify what its role is in terms of bringing things together, holding those disparate groups to a certain extent who make up the board to account for delivering something in a joined up way, because from a public's point of view, there isn't, they're not interested in all these different organisations. They're just interested in the service and expect to be treated the same, whichever service is delivering that particular service that they're accessing. So I think some of it is also in that process, and particularly around consultation for those members of the board. Some principles they sign up to, which is things like being very clear about what they're going to consult on, and the reality of the world in which they're living in, the fact that they are having to ration resources, and being upfront about that. And I think other things, saying, look, consultation is time consuming, takes a lot of effort, and that sometimes they'll hear things that they don't want to hear. And again, being upfront about that is the process that they're engaged in. So, issues again about the role of Health Watch, and again a recognition they just can't push everything onto Health Watch, and certainly about public consultation. Then, in fact, all the organisations need to have their own approach to this, and their own responsibilities around it, and not just saying to Health Watch, well, it's your job, you get on with it. Well, it's an aspect of Health Watch, but it's not the whole responsibility of Health Watch. So again, moving ahead on that, still more thinking to do about that, but certainly the idea of people very much signing up to a joint approach around public consultation was very much, board members are very much in agreement to that. On Health Watch, again, the tenders are going out, so that new service will be put in place in due course, and the board being looking forward very much to that new arrangement being put in place. finally, I think the work programme for the board is being set out, and as I mentioned, the equalities issue is going to be discussed in January, and then the future timetable. Of course, when we get to April, the board does become a statutory body, and some of those meetings will be open to the public in the future. So that's something that people will be able to attend if should they wish to do so. That's about it.